I was just a little girl when everything changed. One rainy evening, my world shattered in seconds. My parents were driving home from a weekend trip when a truck lost control and slammed into their car. They died instantly. I was too young to understand what losing them truly meant, but the silence that followed said everything. No aunts or uncles were waiting to take me in. No grandparents or cousins offering hugs. I was placed in an orphanage, and for 3 long years, that place became my home. It wasn't a bad place, but it was full of sadness. Everyone there had lost something. We learned to be strong, but there were nights when the darkness felt heavier than the blankets we slept under. I often stared at the ceiling and whispered to the sky, asking if someone out there still remembered me. I didn't know then that someone had been watching. One sunny afternoon, a couple walked into the orphanage. They didn't seem flashy or dramatic. They were kind. The woman had warm eyes and a gentle smile. The man spoke softly, as if he didn't want to scare anyone. They didn't rush to pick me, as if I were on display. They sat with me, asked me about my drawings, my favorite books, and what I wanted to be when I grew up. A week later, they came back. They said they wanted to adopt me. Their names were Grace and Malcolm Bennett. From the outside, they appeared to be any other couple. But I would later learn they owned a chain of tech companies and had a private plane. Still, they didn't want people to know they adopted me. Not because they were ashamed, but because they wanted me to have a normal life. They didn't announce it to their business partners or friends. I was their daughter, no questions asked. Growing up in that house was like living in a dream. I had everything I could ever ask for. Private tutors, art classes, vacations in quiet villas. But Grace always reminded me to be grounded. Kindness is your real inheritance, she used to say. I believed her. When I turned 20 and moved into my apartment, Grace and Malcolm took a step back from work and planned a long business tour across Europe. It was around that time I met someone who would change everything. His name was Aiden. We met at a university seminar on ethics and law. He had this easy smile, a sharp mind, and this way of listening that made you feel important. We bumped into each other again at the library, then again at a campus coffee shop. Eventually, he asked if I wanted to join him for a movie night. That first date turned into another and another. Before I knew it, we were inseparable. We dated for 4 years. He made me laugh, supported my goals, and treated me like I was the most special person in the world. But there was something I couldn't ignore. Aiden once told me that his parents were difficult. They came from old money and believed in status and bloodlines. He warned me not to expect warmth or kindness from them. I didn't want to worry him, so I kept 2 secrets, my adoption and my family's wealth. I wanted his parents to see me for who I was, not where I came from or how much money I had. Eventually, the time came for me to meet them. Aiden and I had just gotten engaged, and his family wanted to host a small dinner to celebrate. I was nervous, but I thought, if I show them respect, maybe they'll accept me. I bought a modest dress, practiced my manners, and tried to learn more about their background. I didn't want to mess it up. But deep down, I already had a feeling this was going to be the beginning of something difficult. I just didn't know how hard it was going to get. The night we went to dinner with Aiden's parents is burned into my memory, like a scar that won't fade. We arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. It wasn't just any place. It was the kind where the waiters wear white gloves and address you by your last name. I felt out of place before we even sat down. I had spent nearly an hour getting ready, choosing a soft navy dress that wasn't too flashy, doing my makeup carefully, and tying back my hair. I wanted to look elegant, respectful. Even tucked my engagement ring onto a thin chain around my neck. Aiden said it might be best not to show it yet. When Rose and Thomas Whitmore entered, everything shifted. Their presence felt heavy. Rose didn't smile. She scanned me from head to toe like she was evaluating a piece of furniture she didn't order. Thomas gave Aiden a firm handshake, then turned to me with a nod so slight I barely caught it. We sat down, and the waiter poured sparkling water. No one touched their glasses. Rose stared at my hands and said, "You have delicate fingers. Must be hard to keep them polished on a student budget." I blinked. I didn't know if that was meant to be polite or condescending, so I just smiled. Thomas asked where I grew up. I froze for a second and gave a vague answer, small town Midwest. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Interesting. That explains the accent." I didn't even have one. Every question after that was a trap. "Do your parents work in education or something modest?" Rose asked, tilting her head in mock curiosity. When I said I was raised by adoptive parents who were away on business, she pursed her lips like she'd just smelled something foul. Aiden kept trying to redirect the conversation, but his parents were relentless. When the waiter returned with our appetizers, Rose looked at mine and said, "Well, at least she has taste in food." I couldn't eat a single bite. My stomach was knotted. My hands trembled under the table. Finally, after dessert was served and Thomas made one last offhand remark about how marriage should be kept within similar circles to avoid awkward mismatches, Aiden stood up. His chair screeched against the marble floor. "We're leaving," he said, his voice sharp. "Come on." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my purse and followed him out without a word. The stairs of the other diners trailed behind us like shadows. Outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap. Aiden was shaking with rage. "I'm sorry," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I thought they'd at least try to be decent." I nodded, trying to hold back tears. But they came anyway, streaming down my cheeks, while I kept my eyes on the sidewalk. For a while, Aiden didn't speak to them. He blocked their numbers and ignored their emails. I thought that was the end of it, that we could just move on. But a month later, Aiden told me he'd finally broken the news about our engagement. They weren't happy, he admitted, but they said they'd pay for the wedding, with conditions. Asked what the conditions were. They want control over the guest list, the venue, the invitations, everything. They said if we want their money, it has to be their event. I didn't even need to respond. Aiden saw it in my face. "We're not doing that," he said firmly. "We're not giving them that power." So we made a different choice. We eloped. Aiden and I booked a quiet ceremony in the mountains, just the two of us, a local officiant and a photographer. No drama, no fancy show. Just love. I wore a simple dress, and he wore a dark gray suit with his hair still messy from the wind. We exchanged vows by a small stream under a clear sky. I cried again, but this time from joy. When we sent photos to my parents, they sent back a simple message. "You did the right thing. We're proud of you." Even from across the ocean, I could feel their support. I didn't need Rose and Thomas to approve. I had my kind of family, and in that moment, I thought we could finally leave their cold world behind. I was wrong. A few months after the elopement, Aiden's parents invited us to their wedding anniversary party. I was surprised and, honestly, a bit hopeful. Maybe they were ready to put things behind them. Maybe they wanted to start over. The invitation came in a formal gold envelope, sealed with a wax crest like something from a royal court. Aiden looked at it and sighed. "We don't have to go," he said. But I wanted to try. For him. For the idea that families can grow and change. I wore a soft peach dress that night. Not too bold, not too plain. I kept my hair down and wore a polite smile. We arrived at their estate, a massive, cold mansion with glass walls and servants in black uniforms. People floated around in designer gowns and tuxedos, sipping champagne like it was air. But from the moment we stepped inside, I felt it. No one greeted me. Not a single hello or handshake. Most people smiled at Aiden, but when their eyes moved to me, they flicked away like I wasn't worth their attention. Some whispered behind raised glasses. One woman even looked me up and down, then leaned in to whisper something that made her friend laugh behind a napkin. Aiden held my hand tighter. "Ignore them," he muttered. Dinner was served in a marble hall under crystal chandeliers. I sat between Aiden and a man named Charles, who barely acknowledged my presence. He turned his chair slightly toward the woman on his other side and spoke over me the entire evening. The food was beautiful, but I couldn't taste any of it. Then came the speeches. Rose and Thomas stood at the front of the hall, arms linked, smiles polished for the crowd. Rose took the microphone first. "We want to thank all of you for coming tonight. It's been such a joy to share our journey with friends who know our values, our history, and our standards. There were chuckles. Thomas continued, when you've built a legacy like ours, you hope your children make choices that reflect it. Sometimes they surprise you with their taste. Another round of laughter. And you learn, Rose added with a smirk, that not everyone who joins the family understands how we do things. But we're patient. We give people time to catch up. I froze. Aiden's jaw clenched. I couldn't sit there anymore. I rose from my chair, quietly, carefully, and walked out. I didn't cry.
Not yet.
I just needed to breathe. I needed to be away from the sea of eyes and veiled insults. Aiden followed me outside a few minutes later. But instead of comfort, I saw anger in his face. You couldn't just stay calm, he snapped. I blinked. What? You walking out like that. It made it worse. You embarrassed them. You embarrassed me. I stared at him, my heart thudding in my chest. They humiliated me, Aiden. Did you not hear what they said? They were just being themselves. You should have expected it. But now everyone's going to say you ruined their night. That night, everything shifted. The messages started the next day. From anonymous accounts, from numbers I didn't recognize. Gold digger. Out of your league. You'll never be one of us. One even said, stay in your lane, orphan. Aiden didn't say much. He was distant, quiet, buried in work or on his phone. When I asked him if he was okay, he shrugged. I'm tired. I don't want to talk about this. He didn't defend me anymore. And I was desperate to bring things back to how they were. So I did something I never thought I would. I invited his parents over for tea. I apologized. For walking out. For making a scene. For not understanding the tone of the evening. Rose sipped her tea slowly and said, well, we appreciate the effort. Let's hope this is the start of something better. Aiden watched me closely that night. I think a part of him was relieved. I think another part of him saw what I had to sacrifice. I smiled through the rest of the evening. But inside, I felt smaller than I'd ever been. Every Sunday evening became something I dreaded. Jack's family had a tradition of hosting weekly dinners, and even after everything that had happened, he never missed one. At first, he insisted I come with him, saying it would look worse if I didn't. So I went, quietly, always hoping maybe this time would be different. But it never was. Each week, I'd sit at that long dining table under their chandelier, picking at food while his relatives chatted around me like I wasn't there. Rose would occasionally toss a polite comment my way, dripping in fake sweetness. Tom rarely looked in my direction. And the others? They followed their lead. They acted like I didn't belong. One evening, I told Jack I didn't want to go. I was tired and honestly, I didn't see the point. Then don't, he said flatly, but I still have to. I watched him leave without a second glance. That night, I sat alone on the sofa, the silence of our apartment pressing against me like a wall. The next Sunday, he asked me to come again. I agreed. Maybe out of habit. Maybe out of hope. Dinner started as usual. Small talk.
Wine.
I sat beside Jack and smiled when spoken to, even though my stomach churned. Then, midway through the meal, Rose turned toward me with her cold blue eyes and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, I suppose it's easier to pretend someone belongs when you forget they're just an orphan. The room went silent. I froze. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto my plate. Every eye turned to me, waiting, watching. Jack didn't say a word. He didn't take my hand. He didn't correct her. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then handed me $100 bill folded neatly in half. Get yourself an Uber, he muttered. My chest tightened so fast I could barely breathe. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out. I didn't cry in front of them. I saved that for the sidewalk, where my tears blurred the lights of passing cars. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Jack showered and crawled into bed without a word. He turned his back on me and fell asleep like nothing happened. And I knew then I wasn't his priority. His parents were. Their approval meant more to him than my dignity. The silence between us stretched for days. I stopped trying to fill it. I stopped checking my phone for his messages or asking him if he was okay. I moved around the apartment like a guest, not a wife. Every part of me started shutting down, one piece at a time. I felt like I was disappearing. Then one night, while I was curled up on the couch in my robe, trying to numb the ache with an old movie, my phone rang. It was my mom.
Grace.
I almost didn't answer, but something in me reached for that comfort I hadn't felt in so long. Her voice came through gently and concerned. Sweetheart, we just landed in Rome. We were thinking of you. How are you doing? I hesitated. For a second, I wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, but I couldn't. So I told her. All of it. The humiliation. The dinner. The Uber money. Jack's silence. My heartbreak. Every word poured out like water breaking through a dam. She didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she whispered, "Oh, honey.
No.
This isn't love." And for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Because I knew she was right. After that phone call, something in me shifted. My mother listened without judgment, only quiet, steady heartbreak in her voice. When I finally stopped crying, she said softly, "Your father's going to want to hear this." I wasn't sure if that made me more nervous or relieved, but I agreed. The next day, my dad called. His voice was calm, too calm. "Sweetheart, thank you for telling us. We had no idea. And I promise, this ends now." I'd never heard him sound so focused. Malcolm Burns wasn't just a protective parent. He was one of the most influential businessmen in the country. People didn't cross him. Not twice. Within a few hours, my parents rearranged everything. They canceled meetings, chartered their private jet, and flew back to the States. They didn't tell Jack or his family. They didn't make announcements. They just landed quietly and checked into a hotel downtown. My mom texted me to meet her for a relaxing day. I found her waiting outside a spa, holding 2 cappuccinos and smiling like nothing was wrong. "We'll take care of the heavy lifting," she said, linking her arm through mine. "Today, you're just going to breathe." The spa was like stepping into another world. Warm oils, soft music, and my mother humming gently next to me during facials. I closed my eyes and let myself feel light, even if just for a moment. Later that evening, I returned home. Jack wasn't there, as usual. He'd started disappearing every afternoon and returning late, offering no explanations. I sat at the kitchen counter and opened his laptop. I wasn't usually the type to snoop, but I needed answers, and I found them. An email from Rose. "Dinner this Friday at the Marlowe. Private room booked. We'll toast to family values." I stared at the screen for a long time. The next morning, I forwarded the email to my dad and called my mom. "They're meeting this Friday," I said. "Perfect," she replied. "Let your father handle the restaurant. My friend Diane has already started preparing the divorce papers. She'll file them the moment your dad gives the word." It felt like a machine had begun moving around me, powerful and precise. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. Friday came quickly. I didn't see Jack much that week. He'd fallen into a routine of ignoring me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in his carefully curated world. That morning, he left in a hurry and didn't say goodbye. I spent the day with my mom, going over the final steps. She handed me a sleek folder with legal paperwork, a copy of the ring receipt, and a statement of financial assets she and my father were prepared to use in court. "He thought you were weak," she said quietly. "He's about to learn otherwise." That evening, I stood in front of the mirror and dressed slowly. A simple black dress, minimal jewelry, hair pinned neatly. Not for Jack. Not for Rose. For me. My dad arrived an hour before dinner, dressed in a crisp navy suit. He hugged me briefly and said, "You sure you're ready?" I nodded. I've never been more sure. He placed a small envelope in his inner jacket pocket. Time to introduce myself. The Marlowe was glowing that night. Elegant lighting, clinking glasses, and a soft string quartet playing in the corner. Jack's family had taken the largest private room in the back. When I entered with my father at my side, the staff guided us straight there without question. As we approached, I could hear Rose laughing. Her voice carried through the hall like a sharp wind. Jack's voice followed, quieter, polite. He hadn't even noticed I wasn't home when he left earlier that day. The doors opened, and conversation halted. Every head turned. Rose's face tightened immediately. Tom's smile froze. Jack looked like someone had poured ice water down his back. My father stepped in first, calm and confident.
Good evening.
I believe we haven't met properly. I'm Malcolm Burns, Jennifer's father. You could hear the room exhale. Tom stood up, confused. Burns? As in? Yes, my father replied. That one. He turned toward Jack and pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket. You'll find the divorce papers inside. Already drafted. Our lawyers will be in touch. Jack looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Jen, what is this? This, I said quietly, is everything you ignored. Everything you allowed. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We watched her try. We watched her bend over backwards to fit into your world while you all chipped away at her dignity.
And you stood by.
You handed her cash to send her home alone after your mother called her an orphan. Rose's face drained of color. Tom tried to speak, but my father raised a hand. You don't get to talk. Not tonight.
He turned to me.
You ready? I nodded. We left them sitting in silence, still stunned. The room full of whispers behind us didn't matter anymore. Within a week, things began to unravel for the Whitmores. My father didn't need to do much. Just a few discreet conversations with the right people. Investors started pulling out of Tom's firm. 2 large clients canceled long-term contracts. A pending acquisition deal vanished overnight. I didn't gloat, but I didn't feel sorry either. Messages began flooding in. Some are full of hatred, calling me spiteful, cold, and a traitor. Others were desperate. Rose emailed me at 3 a.m. saying, "We didn't mean to push you away. We just didn't understand." Jack sent a long text that I never replied to. He asked if we could talk. Said he didn't expect things to go this far. He didn't fight the divorce. He signed the papers quietly. When everything was finalized, my parents took me away. We spent 2 weeks in Tuscany, staying in a quiet villa surrounded by olive trees and soft golden hills. I read books under the sun, walked through open markets, and let my mother braid my hair like she used to when I was a little girl. One night, sitting under the stars with a warm blanket wrapped around me, I thought about everything I had endured. The dinners, the insults, the betrayal. It still hurt, but the pain didn't control me anymore. I saw how much I had changed, how much I had survived. I saw the quiet strength in the mirror and realized I hadn't lost anything. I had simply found myself again. I didn't have Jack, but I had something better. I had the truth. I had my voice. And I had a family that never stopped loving me.